Hey everyone, Seth Campbell here with the new Segue Says podcast. Well, in this episode, we're tackling two bluesy rock songs from the 70s that I'm almost sure inspired the other. The first song is Rocky Mountain Way by Joe Walsh, and the second song is The Stake by Steve Miller Band. Both of these songs were hits, radio staples. You probably heard them. Rocky Mountain Way came out in 1973, and The Stake came out in 1977. And I'm pretty darn sure Steve Miller was at least inspired, shall we say, by Joe Walsh. I love Steve Miller. This is not, subtle, shaded Steve Miller at all. But let me put it this way. This is the groove of Rocky Mountain Way. This is the groove of The Stake. Resemblance there. Anyway, so as you heard, though, they're in different keys. Rocky Mountain Way is in E and The Stake is in F. Now usually when we got two songs in different keys with a segue, unless one kind of can lead into the other from the last chord or something, we'll change the key of one of the songs. But we're not doing that today. Because it's only a half step, we're actually going to use the technique that is frequently used to modulate half steps, but you'll have to wait and see what that is. So, Rocky Mountain Way, Joe Walsh, which when he was with the Eagles, they played from time to time, but it's known mostly as a Joe Walsh solo piece. So, again, simple blues tune. When I was playing in a student band that Marty Walsh, who I've mentioned before, the guy who gave me the nickname Segue, the Berkeley professor, put together. This was one of the tunes we played. Marty sang it. He sang it fantastically, and he did some incredible guitar. Neither of these songs lyrically make any sense, but think about it. Their words are written by Joe Walsh and Steve Miller. Of course they're not going to make any sense. I spent the last year Rocky Mountain Way. I couldn't get much higher. Out to pasture, think it's safe to say it's time to open fire. And we don't need the ladies crying 'cause the story's sad. And the Rocky Mountain Way is better than the way we've had. Joe Walsh, much higher vocal range than I have, so you'll have to deal with the falsetto. My falsetto is actually getting stronger. I've been working with my vocal coaches. It's getting better, but still a ways to go before I can perfectly replicate a Joe Walsh vocal. But anyway, so now onto The Stake by Steve Miller Band. And I developed a love for the Steve Miller Band CD my grandma and grandpa had. My grandpa used to listen to. My grandpa actually passed away not long ago as of the recording of this episode, so this is one of many artists and songs that bring back fond memories of my many years listening to music with him, so special place in my heart. Nobody loves you like the way I do. So both the songs, again, this is a very similar groove, this bluesy triplet, 6/8 pattern. And what you're hearing that's similar is over the sustained bass note of the 1, which is E in Rocky Mountain Way, and F in the Stake, is the flat 7 chord, which in the case of Rocky Mountain Way, for example, is D. So D, 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 E, all over an E in the bass. Now in the Stake, that's an F with an E flat, and the E flat is the 7th chord. And you'll notice the rhythmic patterns are the same, but the Stake adds this, which is the flat 7 to the 4 chord, which is B flat, still all over F in the bass. So in Rocky Mountain Way, it would just end there. I guess if you're gonna borrow a groove, it helps to do something new, something to make it your own. So, how do we segue these two? Well, it's pretty easy. Rocky Mountain Way goes into a long jam. It actually uses a talk box, which I've never mentioned in this podcast before until a couple episodes ago, and now here I am mentioning it again. And there's this long jam over this just sustained E in the bass. Eventually going back to this groove here. Now, the easy secret, if you will, to modulating up a half step, and you'll hear this in just about any musical theater tune, is that whatever note is the 1 of your first key, that same note is the 3 in the chord tone. So it's in the chord of the 5 chord, which is the dominant chord, the leading chord, to the 1 chord of the key you're trying to go. So in other words, a C7, for example, is the 5 chord of F, or just C is the 5 chord of F. So if a song is in the key of F and you hear it go to C, you expect it to go to F. It's normal to hear a chord lead to the chord that it's a 5th above. So the chord tone, the 3rd chord tone, it's the 2nd chord tone, but it's the 3rd of the chord, is E. Now if we're in the key of E, we already have E in the melody, so we can really emphasize it, or E is the root, so we can emphasize it in the melody. And then we can go to the 5 chord of the key we're trying to get to, which is a half step up, F. And we can still emphasize this E. And because these two chords have a chord tone in common, it's easy enough to make it a passing chord. And all of this is really technical music stuff. So if you don't really follow that, just trust me on this. If you want to get from E to F as your key, just go E, C, F. So again, that would sound something like this. You have a couple options. You could do what I just did there, which is not bring in that little extra part of the groove that's exclusive to the Stake right when you change the key. Or you could bring it in right as you change the key, so you're just doing the Rocky Mountain Way groove when you're in E. And then as soon as you get to F, you start playing the Stake groove. Or you could do the third option, which is what I like to do, which is foreshadow it a little bit. So you're still in E. You know, you're playing this groove here. And you could throw in that little extra part. So go to the 4 chord, which is an A. So if, say, someone knows the Steve Miller song better than they know the Joe Walsh song, they're saying, like, wait a minute. You know, they're hearing this groove this whole time. Like, and they might be thinking to themselves, funny, I expected it to, like, I know this song, but I thought it goes da, 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 da. And then when you do that, you know, that's weird. That's what I thought it sounded like. And then you can't do that on the one where you modulate because the C has to take the place of that A. So you do probably 3 times, go into that A, and then the last time, C. And if you wanted to, at the end of the stake, you could, in the new key, throw in an extra chorus of Rocky Mountain Way. Now, it's a lot harder to modulate down a half step. I wouldn't advise doing that. I would just keep it in the new key, which is F, but, you know, after the last, nobody loves you like the way I do. But I keep the stake groove in there because I can. And the Rocky Mountain Way is better than the way we've had. Yeah. So yeah. That's pretty much it. You know, the technical side of the musical explanation was very, you know, it was very technical and in-depth, but if you don't get it, like I said, just E, C, F. That's all you need to know to change keys from E to F. So, with that said, that about covers it. So hopefully you've enjoyed, hopefully you've learned something. I'll see you in the next episode. Take care of yourselves.